Welcome to Points in the Podcast. I am Elias Schuster. I'm joined by Matt Rooney. And Matt, we have basketball stuff to talk about. This is exciting. This is a rarity at this time of the year.
It is exciting. Like not to, I think we did a good job of going deep into the internet for some topics, but like you can only preview the Team USA roster that isn't filled with many superstars for so long, and I think we did a good job of stuff like that. But yeah, now we have some trade rumors, we have some extensions, we have a whole bunch of stuff going on, which is like for a dead period, I should say. At least
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
not like it's July 1st all over again. Let's call we'll pump the brakes there, but we have some stuff going on, which is it's nice, it's refreshing.
it was a bizarre week in terms of what usually happens in August. There was a lot of news that actually dropped. Again, it's not major stuff, but it's enough for us to fill out a Google Doc with and say,
It's
hey,
something.
this week we got something to go through. So we're gonna get through that stuff today. That'll be kind of in our weekly bullet points section. We'll get you caught up on what you may have missed, and after that, last week I realized it was kind of a good off-season thing to do. I picked two teams in the Eastern Conference that you kind of had to keep your eye on that could potentially rise up the ranks this season. And I thought, hey, if we did that two East teams last week, might as well do two West teams this week. So we'll wrap up the show just briefly giving listeners an overview of two Western Conference teams that were towards the bottom of the barrel last season, but have potential to take a jump up the standings this year. And before we start, I want to give news that we've now made it two rec league games in a row with no injuries. Matt, I want you to be proud of me.
I'm clapping if you can hear me. I'm trying to clap into my microphone here.
The first two shows, there were injuries had, but we've gotten through the last two games now, and minimal injuries. No injuries, minimal soreness as well. So the body's getting conditioned. I feel like I'm ramping up for training camp.
That's it. You're getting into better shape when the soreness goes down from like I can't walk the next day to my knee just hurts a little bit. I'm doing a little bit better.
Right. And is my team winless? Perhaps. We don't need to get into that part.
We'll get there. But winning comes later.
Winning comes, and what the small victories are in the way you feel after. And as long as your heart's telling you that you feel happy and that your body doesn't hate you when you wake up the next morning, and your
my body hates me every day I wake up. That's a different story.
Yeah, I get home and the first thing my fiance always says to me is after the first two scarring incidences, because the second one where I like popped my thumb out of place was bad. I walk inside like hunching over, grabbing my thumb. So now she's scared every time I walk through the door, whether I'm injured. But babe, I'm staying strong. Okay, so just wanted to give that update because I know that the many people that are already listening to Points.
I'm sure we got a lot of rec league players out there listening, and that know exactly what you're going through, that know exactly what we're talking about, and probably identify with what you're saying.
Right, and here's the thing: it's my first rec league in a few years. I'm getting back in it, so I knew the bumps and bruises were coming, and fortunately, I think my body's getting more used to it. And hey, this last game that we lost, we played the best team in the league. They had this 6'6" person that I had to try to guard. And here's the thing: I'm pretty scrawny, folks. There's not a lot of muscle on this. There's not a lot of meat on these bones. I'm tall. I'm like 6'2", but the muscle is not there. So this person was like clearly played, I don't know, whatever, D2 somewhere maybe in college. And wow, that guy was giving me a tough time. So, but I didn't get hurt, so that's all that matters most.
That's the big win.
All right, so weekly bullet points. Let's start with our normal weekly bullet points here. Like we said, a lot of news this week, which was exciting for us. We'll start with some extension talk for anybody who may have missed it. Both Josh Hart and Anthony Davis got extensions. Let's start with the, I guess, less superstar name, because that was the more recent of the two. Josh Hart with the New York Knicks ended up signing a 4-year, $81 million deal to stick with the team. He picked up his options for this year. I'm pretty sure the expectation was not only after he planned to return next year, but also after the trade that he was going to be extended. They sent a 23rd overall pick, I believe, to the Portland Trail Blazers this past season for him. That pick turned into Chris Murray, Keegan Murray's brother out of Iowa, pretty solid player. And, they knew that giving up a first rounder for Josh Hart meant that they were likely going to have to keep him in. So what does that number come in at? 4 years, $81 million. And that's a lot of money, but it's similar to the many situations we've run into throughout this offseason thus far. that's just the price you have to pay now to keep guys. $20 million a year is going to become the average
It's the new
annual
10 million a
salary.
year.
Yeah, exactly. The mid-level exception currently is around $12.5 million. As the cap continues to rise and that new TV money comes in a couple of years, you're going to see that mid-level exception start to creep a lot closer to $20 million. So in 4 years from now, when he's on that final year of that deal, like in 3 years from now, whatever it may be, the 20 million is going to look a lot more normal to what certain role players around the league is, and our league is getting. And let's not forget too, Josh Hart is a very good player. I've always been very high on him, maybe a little bit too high at times, but he's one of the best rebounding guards in the NBA. He averaged about 7 rebounds a game last year. He's a tremendous fit, I think, in New York. He's had a problem kind of finding his footing in terms of the right team to land on.
I think New York's perfect for him.
But I agree. New York's the perfect destination for him. He is one of those high motor, versatile defending guards. He's kind of 3-and-D. He's not necessarily the most gifted 3-point shooter, but he is a highly efficient finisher around the rim, good off-ball mover, good cutter, just really the kind of role player that you want around a star. And while they don't have any superstars, I'd say, in New York, they have a decent core right now in Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett. So, and who knows, maybe a couple of those pieces they can move down the road for a really big star. They have a good amount of picks. Yeah, they have a good amount of picks. They have some good young guys on their bench. And if they move for a star, Josh Hart's a good guy to have locked down for the future. And the money, it's definitely not cheap for someone who isn't considered one of your top 3 players, on your team. And maybe some nights not top 4, but he's the type of role player you want to invest in, similar to what like the Bulls have looked at. I mean, Alex Caruso doesn't make nearly as much, so the deal looks even better. But you think of a guy like Alex Caruso and how he makes a difference every single night when he's on the floor for Chicago, but he fits in that role player archetype. That's the same thing I think Josh Hart can do in New York. So overall, I smart move by them, and it frustrates me because I don't want the Knicks to necessarily have nice things, but it's a good move, and I just love Josh Hart.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not, I mean, and the Knicks right now aren't paying, big money to superstars. Obviously, Brunson, Julius Randle getting paid, but they don't have a Zach LaVine type, Jaylen Brown type contract on their books. Like, you can afford the luxury that is Josh Hart. That on some nights he might be your 3rd best player, on some nights he might be your 5th, but he's going to play good D. He has length on the wing, and I know we said he's not the greatest 3-point shooter. You know what he shot from 3 last year? And I granted small sample size in 25 games with the Knicks.
Wasn't it
51.9%?
Yeah,
so that's not going to carry over. I know that. I know he's not going to shoot 51% from 3 with the Knicks last year, but who knows? Maybe something with that group clicked a little bit. Maybe getting him in a different situation where he had a little bit more skill around him, a little bit more, wealth to spread the ball around to help him out a little bit. But he shot better with the Knicks last year, and yeah, he gives you length and he gives you deep, which is that's fine. That's I feel like that's right about the threshold when you can start to call a guy 3-and-D. But
yeah, exactly.
He's not going to shoot 51% again, but he's got that potential in him, and I think he's going to take another step in that 3-point progression next year. Obviously, not the 51%, but I think you'll see him shoot higher than that 35%.
And just knowing Tom Thibodeau, that's a Tommy Tibbs guy.
That's a Tibbs guy. That's honestly, that's why I said he fits in New York. It has nothing to do with the Knicks or Madison Square Garden. It is the roster build and how you said it's constructed, but also Tibbs. That's a Tibbs guy through and through.
Well, and also the Knicks are rebuilding the Villanova Wildcats of the 2016 national championship.
Hey.
Might as well.
If
that
it ain't broke, don't fix it. That team was really good.
Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo is now there, and
I forgot DiVincenzo ended up.
Yeah, great signing. The Dante signing, I think, is one of the more underrated of the offseason. Their backcourt's a little. Hart kind of fixes some of what their deficiencies are. There's not a ton of size in that backcourt. But and Dante's, he's somebody who provides similar attributes to what Hart can do at a different position, and just kind of another reliable role player type. So the Knicks are building out nicely. They're kind of a team that's going to be a whole is better than the sum of its parts situation, but that's fine. Especially if Brunson continues to progress and Randall stays at the level he did last year and doesn't drop off like he did 2 years ago. That's a team that'll be right in the in the mix, and it's going to be a tough out again. So overall, good stuff in the Big Apple.
Probably run out of gas at some point in the first round or second round of the playoffs, but that's okay.
Right, it's fine. Yeah, they're not a championship contender, but they're a fun playoff team as of right now.
Yeah.
And they continue to be. Next extension came for Anthony Davis, 3 years. If you want to, if you're talking about money and you're scared of money, and if you're standing right now for any reason, I don't know, maybe you're on a walk and you're listening to this, or actually if you're driving, pull over to the side of the road. And if you haven't heard this number yet, I'm assuming you have, but if you're driving, let's be safe. Anthony Davis extension, 3 year, $186 million to stay with the Los Angeles Lakers. Oh no, I just heard a crash. The Lakers, they had to do it at the end of the day. I understand the move to
$62 million
to do it.
Right. I
Right.
just did the math on my calculator.
Well, yeah, pull up if you just search Anthony Davis contract, pull up the spot rack thing, you can have bring up the exact details.
I don't think I want to.
Yeah, it's a lot per year, obviously. But when he's at his best, we're talking about a guy who's probably a top 10 player in the NBA. Defensive player of the year, arguably the best defensive player in the NBA when he's healthy, a true superstar, somebody who it can give anybody problems on any given night. He's one of the few guys in the league who can, go toe to toe with somebody as physical as Giannis. So look, Anthony Davis, the mystique has worn off over the years. There's no question about it, especially because of how little he ends up actually staying on the floor. But Anthony Davis is still AD. He's still the brow. He's still a superstar caliber player. And he's still didn't he just turn 30?
He's 30. So, he'll be 30 this season.
So that at the end of the day is the big question about this contract, right? Because you're extending him. The one reason I also say that you had to do it is LeBron's probably gone in a couple of years at most. He could be gone after this year for all we know, Mm-hmm. The Bronny situation now is, and we're wishing him the best of health, is now a little up in the air if he's going to continue to wait for his son to enter the NBA. However, I just, we don't know how much longer LeBron's got. The Lakers, they're the Lakers. They don't want to lose a big name, lose a star. So they lock down Davis long term. Now, the question is, Anthony Davis has barely been able to stay on the floor. It's been a tremendous issue.
And that doesn't get, as we just talked about at the beginning of this show, that doesn't get better with age.
No, when you're 30, especially when you're 30, and I'll just rattle you off how many games he's played over the past or during his Lakers tenure.
It's funny you bring this up. I was just looking this up too, because I wanted to see. It's honestly worse than I thought.
That's actually true. It probably is worse than most people think, just because of how often Anthony Davis and the freaking Lakers are talked about. Turn on ESPN, they're mentioned every single second. So since we'll go back to 2018-19, which was his final year with the New Orleans Pelicans, he played in 56 games. Following that first year with the Lakers, 62, 36. After that, 40, and then 56. So he hasn't played over 62 games since the 2017-18 season where he played 75. And back to that Pelicans tenure, he was decently reliable. I mean, it wasn't great. He would average about 60.
Great, but it was better.
He would average, it looks like, about, if I had to do it in my head, about like 68 games per season. The final 2 years in New Orleans, or before his last season, the two of the last three, he played 75. So he was actually staying on the floor. But these past 36, 40, and 56 of the past 3 years, and you just handed that guy 60-something million a year as he enters his mid-30s. So again, do I understand why they felt inclined to have to get this done? Yes. But is it a significant gamble on his ability to stay healthy and not crumble under, over these next few years? Yes. For the exact amounts, here's what we're dealing with. So next season, he will make 40 million, 40.6. This is on his current contract and not the extension. 40.6 million. The year after that, he'll make 43 million. Now, that seems a little bit okay. That's fine. That's Anthony Davis. We get it. Then it goes in 25-26, jumps up to 54.6. This is an estimate by Spot Rack. Then it gets to 59 million, and then it will get to 63 million in 2017-18. Which is a player option. And if I had to guess, that option
will take that option. Yeah.
If I had to guess, the option's picked up at age 34. So unless he goes over to Germany or Russia and gets some sort of secret surgery that makes him younger, I'm gonna assume that he takes his 63 million at 34 years old. So
I gotta just say, you've said a couple times now you understand why they had to do it, and this might be me just being the more casual basketball fan as we've discussed. Well, you're the diehard, know all the ins and outs. I don't understand why they had to do it. He's locked up for 2 more years. Obviously, players like getting that, like having that security, like having the contract. That's nice. He's locked up for 2 more years. You said it. LeBron is maybe one, maybe two. If you get to the point where he's around for a third year, then you can kind of revisit this with Anthony Davis. Why do you need to commit 50 some $million a year to a guy that's going to be not a superstar anymore? I shouldn't say not a superstar anymore, but likely not a superstar anymore. Way past his prime, old and injured, and a guy that you're just going to have to sit there with on the books, and then becomes not really like that tradable of an asset either, because the money is so stupid and it's locked up for 3 years. I truly don't understand it.
So
and it's probably because I know that's the Lakers, and the Lakers like their stars. They want, but like at that point, 2 years from now, I think you're wanting to hit the reset button,
Right.
and then you're just going to be anchored with $60 million a year for 3 years for a guy who's playing 40 games.
I don't, yeah, and let me be clear. I definitely don't disagree with that like perspective. I like I said, I think I can understand why they felt like they had to do it, but that's not me necessarily saying I think it's the right move, nor disagree with the fact if you think that it's the wrong move, because it's not like next season was a player option and there was fear that he could opt
he's
out.
Here for two more.
He's there. It's guaranteed. So maybe he demands a trade or whatever. But then, like you said, especially with the LeBron clock ticking right now, if LeBron's not there in 2 more years, then you have at least, and you don't extend Davis, you have a natural, rebuild mark.
Yeah.
You have a natural to take a step back. I guess, like I said, I think the only thing that I'm guessing here is that the Lakers are the Lakers. They don't want to go through another rebuild. They did that before LeBron came. It was a long. People forget how long it was.
It was bad
for them to not be in the playoffs after the Kobe era. And my guess too is they think, well, LeBron leaves, we're going to get another superstar in here to be Davis's running mate, and it'll be fine. So I don't know. I do think that the gamble that they're taking on Davis's health and ability to maintain a superstar level of play is incredibly risky, and the money, like, yes, the cap's going up. Yes, this money is not going to look as ridiculous in 2026 or whatever, but it's not like it's
still a big number.
It's not like a write-off. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. It's still a massive number. So I don't disagree with you at all, and I think in 2 years we could easily, before this extension even kicks in, especially if the Lakers, they struggle to compete over these next 2 seasons, we could easily be sitting there like, why didn't they just use this natural moment to take a step back and rebuild? So
guess what? You could still probably get whatever free agent you want at that point, because you're still the Lakers.
You're not wrong. So
I don't know.
It's definitely, I definitely don't agree with this one as much as, or like this one as much as the Josh Hart one. It's a scary amount of money to invest in a player who has very rarely been able to stay on the floor. So I guess we'll see how that goes, but hey, whatever. You do you Lakers. You say you got all the money to spend, so you just keep spending it, I guess. Okay, moving on from that, the next little thing here. Well, I'm looking at my Google Doc, but I'm gonna move that down, and we'll go to the thing that's a little more. There's a little more meat on the bones. Shams Charania earlier this week, he sent out an article kind of discussing the status of Damian Lillard, James Harden. The update for everybody, if you haven't seen the article, is that there are no updates. There's basically
thrilling stuff.
Yeah, real thrilling.
We have no updates.
Real off-season content right there. Update. There's really no updates. But the kind of interesting thing that he did include is some comments on Pascal Siakam's current availability in the trade market. This is not really anything new in terms of the Toronto Raptors' willingness to listen to trades on him and to see what he can get in the market. However, there has been very little interest on Siakam's behalf to leave the Raptors. It doesn't seem like something that he's interested in doing, and it's not like he's requested a trade. That's something that we've known before this, and that was reiterated in the article by Shams. So what he had to say in there was basically just opening the door to the rumors. He said, is it possible that Siakam stays with the organization through this upcoming trade deadline? Yes, it is, just because, like I said, he doesn't want to leave, but the rumors are likely going to continue because he's unrestricted free agent in 2024, and the Raptors have to make a decision if they want to continue to pay him and build around him, or go the younger route and continue to build around a guy like Scotty Barnes. The one main trade rumor, if you will, that was in here was attached to the Atlanta Hawks. They expressed, or Sharania shared, that they have kind of talked about an idea of DeAndre Hunter, AJ Griffin, and picks for Pascal Siakam. I think that DeAndre Hunter and AJ Griffin would be an acceptable return for somebody like him, especially with picks. I think those are two good, Hunter's relatively young, and AJ Griffin's very young. And, Hunter's a little bit repetitive to, I think, what somebody like OG Anunoby can do for you. However, whether OG Anunoby stays after this season is also a question, because he's got a contract that's up, that's coming up too. But yeah, I think that Atlanta landing spot is interesting. The Hawks clearly seem to be in the market to further this, further upgrade this team around Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. My guess is if they can't, there's those rumors about Trae Young that have popped up, and they're like, maybe we just got to kind of press a reset button after this season. But what if we can add another star into the mix and get our own little big three going? So who knows? But basically, it just seems like the rumors on Pascal Siakam are going to continue over the next few months. Whether or not it actually leads to a deal is questionable, since the Raptors have already batted off all of these requests to sell in the past. And, this season, I will say, is the season they have to decide, like, are we going to move Siakam and Anunoby, or are we going to pay them and continue, trying to build whatever they're trying to build, which has been in the middle the past few years, which is why many have thought they would just sell off. So that's where they're at. The Siakam stuff, though, I will say, I think Siakam's a great player, and I think he's incredibly underrated.
I would agree with that.
The big thing that about like Siakam is, I don't think people realize how good of a year he had last year. Like, he technically had a career year. He is averaging 24 points per game, nearly 8 rebounds, nearly 6 assists. He played 71 games. He shot 48% from the field. I was looking at it earlier today and just kind of watching some of his tape. He shot 72% at the rim last season. He was, extremely efficient, one of his most efficient years in the short mid-range especially. And, what's truly special about somebody like Siakam that I think this either gets forgotten, or just because the Raptors have been a middling team, people, don't pay enough attention. But what he can do as a playmaker at his size is pretty remarkable, and not something that many people that are 6'9", 6'10", his length can do. He can put the ball on the floor. He can attack the basket. But what he's able to do creating for his teammates off the dribble is at a level that not a lot of other players in the NBA can reach. And then you couple this with the fact that he's an above average defender, a switchable defender, somebody that can guard multiple positions. He's in a league where two-way wings, two-way talents. And I mean, he's not necessarily going to be playing at the wing. He's a power forward, small ball 5. But what he does as a two-way talent, I'm surprised there hasn't been more interest out there for his services. And maybe it's because this next deal is expected to be a big one. He is somebody who's has all-star appearances. I'm assuming wants a lot of money, and teams are a little bit. I think he's 30 now, or 29 at least. So
30, I think, to start. I think he's 30 next year. He'll be 20. He's 29. Yeah, on spot.
Okay.
Right?
He's only 29.
He's 29 for 2023, 24. So yeah,
I think the investment would be worth it for a lot of teams, and I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I guess we don't know if more teams have been calling, but I would expect, especially if he's able to kind of replicate what he did at the end of the last year, at the start of this year, especially as the trade deadline nears. I think that's one of the main names that we'll be hearing about, unless Harden and oh geez, my Siri just went off. What's going on there?
What does she want?
I don't know. She heard something that she didn't like. I just think he's one of the main names that we're going to have to be keeping an eye on. And I think that this might be, this report that we saw this week, kind of just randomly bringing it up in the middle of the offseason, is indicative of that, is a suggestion of, hey, keep your eye on this, because, Toronto has a decision to make, and he he's pretty good. So if as the season nears or as the trade deadline nears, maybe this is one of the bigger names that could be on the move.
Yeah, I just we talked about it. I think it was maybe last week or maybe it was 2 weeks. When it's been 2 podcasts ago. We did Eastern Conference teams with something to prove. I think one of the teams I brought up might have been Toronto, but I know we talked about them. Like, I just don't get what they're trying to do there. It's similar to what the Bulls seem to be doing, and it's like, well, let's just keep running it back. We're a middling Eastern Conference team last year. Maybe let's get lucky and do one more. But I don't know why you want to run it back with this group and either risk losing Siakam for nothing, risk losing Anunoby for nothing, or run it back with and again, I know he's a very good player, but like with a core that's not really getting you anywhere since Kawhi left. And obviously Fred VanVleet is gone too. I think the best case scenario is Siakam gets off to a really good start, but the Raptors kind of don't. And that decision is
kind of what happened last year.
If that's the case for them, I think it is best case scenario because that makes the decision for you. And I think you'll probably get somewhat of a bidding war for Siakam closer to the deadline or at some point, beforehand.
Well, I think
you can bring back a Hall.
Yeah, I think it's
the Atlanta fit makes a lot of sense because it might have been one of the first ones we talked about Trae Young and how like they might be kind of getting to the point where let's see where this takes us, and if it doesn't take us anywhere again this year, maybe we're looking to move something, or maybe Trae Young might want out. I say go all in. Go get Siakam. Then you have Murray. Then you have Young. Then you have Siakam. You have like a mini big three there in a wide open Eastern Conference. And while there might be some ups and downs, your ceiling with those three is very high. Those three are very, very
it's higher for players.
It's definitely higher. I mean, your depth obviously takes a hit, but like you can then be a team that competes in the Eastern Conference if all things go well. And that's what Atlanta's banking on this year before they decide to probably make some big moves anyway. So why not go give yourself the best chance to do that?
Yeah, the Raptors situation is definitely similar to the Bulls. I think it's just both those teams have these assets that they've refused to, or both these teams, I should say, have assets that they could easily use to jumpstart a rebuild. The Raptors, honestly, even more so, which is why because I think the value that they're going to get back for somebody like OG Anunoby and Siakam is just higher than what the Bulls would get back for somebody like DeRozan and LaVine. But so for Toronto, I've honestly been shocked that I thought almost surely that OG Anunoby or somebody would be gone at the trade deadline last year, just because, I don't know, Masai Ujiri's a smart guy, smart front office leader. I was assuming that he saw an opportunity here, especially with the money coming up, especially with the rumors about Fred VanVleet potentially leaving, that this would be an opportunity to take that step back, but gain so many assets in return. Mm-hmm. So the door is still open for them to do that, I would say, at this upcoming season in the first half of this year, but they're losing leverage, as the time goes by. And it's just surprising to me that they don't see this as an opportunity to really shake things up, especially with a young guy like Scotty Barnes on the team. I mean, Scotty had a great rookie year, had a very, I don't know, some people would call it really, I guess, bad, but it was just a sophomore slump, I would say. And I still think there's a high upside there and a lot of potential for him to blossom. So you could also have a core guy to build around if you were to take that step back. So Toronto's situation in general is a bit confusing to me. And it's definitely one of the more interesting ones to watch, I think, around the league as the season gets up and going.
I'm with you.
The next, rattle off a few last little bullet points here. News from this past week. First thing is the Warriors. They were holding workouts. I think this was also reported by Shams Charania. They have brought in names like Dion Waiters, Tony Snell, Juan Toscano-Anderson, Kent Bazemore, Trey Burke, Harry Giles. A lot of guys that just don't have, that you've heard of and just don't have teams and don't have homes right now, and going to be cheap. The Tony Snell one, shout out former Bull Tony Snell, also a box score legend.
Keep getting paid.
Guy who's out there who just, the box scores are always fascinating to look at because it's like 35 minutes, one rebound, nothing else. But I do want to say Tony Snell seems like a good guy to have on the floor. Seems like a smart player. Also, if you haven't heard his story, which is absolutely fascinating and very uplifting and very inspiring, also he came out last year just saying that he discovered at an older age that he did have autism. His son, they learned had autism. He realized he had a lot of similar similar symptoms, I guess, as his son was going through at the time, and went to get checked out and found out that he also had autism, and now he's working with autism in the autism community to help promote better education about the topic and just resources and everything. So if you haven't heard that story, we did write about it at BleacherNation.com. So a little plug here. Go over to BleacherNation.com, newly designed website. You can search Tony Snell in the little bar, and you'll see a story that I wrote about it last season. It's just fascinating and good stuff from Tony Snell. Love it, just fun guy. But the other stuff is Team USA. They pulled off the victory over Puerto Rico, their first exhibition game. Their next exhibition game will be against Slovenia on Saturday. So if you're crazy,
where can I watch these? Or can I watch the NBA TV?
So the Team USA game. Oh, I don't remember.
Not that I'm going to be up for a lot of the games tipping off in Europe.
But I was watching the Team USA one. It was in Vegas, so that's why it was on at a more reasonable time. But I'm trying to remember.
That one was probably on like ESPN2 or something.
Yeah, I can't remember what channel it was on, but I watched that one in basically its entirety, and that was a good game. I don't know. You could probably look it up. I wish I had an answer for you right now. I knew there was a site showing most of the exhibition games. That's the thing. I think a lot of the FIBA World Cup games will be easier to locate. Some of these exhibition games have been
not
hard.
As much.
The Team USA ones you should be able to find somewhere in the, on a basic channel or something, but I don't know right now. As for that Puerto Rico game, though, it's Puerto Rico, so you don't want to overdo it. But it was the first time we got to see this young, energetic team on the court together, and it lived up to the hype. I thought it was really exciting. Paolo Banchero looked great. Tyrese Halliburton was facilitating in the way you want to see. Cam Johnson had his fun little moments. It's just, this is a group that I really think is going to, athletically is going to stun a lot of these teams. I still worry a little bit about their lack of traditional size. They do have a guy like Walker Kessler, who's a big body to throw in there. And I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr.
Jaren Jackson Jr. is big boy.
Incredibly gifted defender, defensive player of the year. Just some of this, I'm interested to see how they work with some of the physicality, and the pace is going to be slowed down a bit on an international stage, but the athleticism they have is crazy, and they were just hounding Puerto Rico on defense. Like the first half was close, but the second half wasn't even a contest. Like it was similar to my rec league game yesterday. It was a 1-point game at half, and then got blown out by like 20 in the second half. So that was the same thing as Team USA, but that was exciting. Next game, Luka Doncic, Slovenia, and this is all exhibition. The 25th, I believe, is when the FIBA World Cup finally starts. Lastly, Derrick Jones Jr., close to home. My heart has a warm place for Derrick Jones Jr. as an obsessor of the Chicago Bulls. He finally, after well over a month of free agency being open, has found a deal with the Dallas Mavericks. It was announced last night. Multiple reports had him there going on a 1-year fully guaranteed deal. So shout out to Derrick Jones Jr. for finding a new home. I think Dallas is a great spot, a great landing spot out of most of the, especially for how long this free agency period went on for him. I actually think Dallas ended up as a great destination for him. Mm-hmm. They have the room to squeeze him into the rotation potentially. He's imagining him next to Luka and Kyrie is fun. Imagining him as a lob threat. As a cutter next to two, above average playmakers is exciting. So good landing spot for him. It's overall good stuff. But, Matt, I feel like Derrick Jones Jr. he's a fun guy to watch.
I'm happy he found a good spot. He was a nice guy. He was a fun guy to watch. He wasn't, I can understand why the Bulls moved on from him because he was a little bit repetitive with what they had. But for the time he was here, he played good. He played good basketball. He played hard. Nothing but good things. I remember from Derrick Jones Jr.'s time with the Bulls, and I'll be rooting for him in Dallas. He seems like a guy that's well liked in the locker room too, which is always important to have, especially in a place like Dallas where you have some guys that might not be too well liked in the locker room. I'm not going to name names, but there might be a little bit of chaos going on in that locker room, and maybe bringing in some stability isn't the worst thing in the world.
And then if someone needs to be someone needs to shut up, he can dunk on them, and he can just humble them a little bit with some of his athleticism.
There you go.
All right, that's good. That wraps up the weekly bullet points. Okay, so moving on. Before we continue, I quickly want to, for anyone who's watching this YouTube live stream, which if you listen to the podcast, you can go to the BetSperts YouTube channel. You can subscribe. You can turn on notifications. We always live stream these episodes directly on YouTube, so you can watch them there. They'll be under the live section And if you weren't able to catch it live, but you do want to watch it and you want to see our face, we do so many funny things on the camera. I mean, it's just we're smoking cigars the whole time. We have top hats on. We're wearing like monocles.
I've actually shotgunned 6 beers during
Yeah,
this
he shotgunned
podcast.
6 beers during this podcast. I've taken 4 shots. It's my dog took a couple shots with me. It's just a crazy
Eli broke
time.
his thumb again. It's been crazy.
Yeah, I didn't scream or anything. So if you want actual footage of this, go to the Bettsburg YouTube channel and subscribe. We also will share on Bleacher Nation. The video will be posted on there after these podcasts are up. If you do not follow Bleacher Nation, which I'm going to assume if you're listening to this, you likely are somebody who has heard of the website. If you don't, go over there. We got a brand new look website.
It looks nice. It's
it
clean.
looks nice. It's clean. It's pretty, and the content is really heating up because the Chicago Bears are starting up. The NFL season's starting up. We got a bunch of NFL coverage, a bunch of fantasy football coverage. The Chicago Cubs, they are doing really well. So there's a lot on that, but also just around the baseball playoffs coming up in general. So good stuff overall, and you should make sure to check it out. And I'm wearing a Lonzo Ball shirt. That was another thing I was going to say before I begin this. Sad times. And that's the kind of stuff you can see if you go to the YouTube page. You can see my shirt. Okay, moving on to this little section here that I want to wrap up the show with, just because we did it last week. Seems like solid off-season content.
Yeah.
2 Western Conference teams that I believe we should keep an extra close eye on as we enter this upcoming season, and whose ceilings probably remain higher than we want to give them credit for. The first team that I want to make sure we touch on is the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think for basketball nerds of sorts, this isn't a big shocker. Basketball nerds seem to love the Oklahoma City Thunder, but I think when you really dig into it and you understand why, you can see how much room there is here for this team to really take a jump sooner than later. They're not only do they have a lot of depth, but I think they have a player that could enter, a time when he was last year, but could enter superstar status just this upcoming season, and that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Last season, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander entered the true all-star realm. He took a massive step in the right direction. I loved him before last year, and I never really thought that he'd do what he did last year, but he did. He averaged 31.4 points per game, 5.5 assists, 1.6 steals. He was 6th in the NBA in total steals. His command of the game was just pretty astonishing to watch. Like, few players last year, when you watched, had control of their team and control of the game in the way that he did. He was just one of the few guards also that was consistently every night doing it on both ends of the floor. He's a great defensive player. The thing, too, that I want people to understand, I want to go back to the 31.4 points per game. This isn't like he was doing this on a 25-win team. This was a team that was in the play-in tournament. This was a team that wasn't expected to be in the play-in tournament and was.
Kind of had no business getting as far as they did, which was the play-in tournament.
Right, and they almost, they were in there, and they almost
they're right there.
They almost cracked a first-round series, or it felt like they could based off the talent that they had. He 31.4 points per game. He shot 51% from the field. So it's not like he's just chucking up shots and getting lucky. It's not, the level at which he was scoring efficiently was absurd. He got to the line 10.9 times. That free throw attempts per game is what his average ended up being. And I also want to point out that the 31.9 points per game came on less than one made three-pointer a game. So
that's kind of wild.
So yeah,
that's efficient. That's really efficient.
Well, it goes to show his driving abilities is remarkable. He's one of the best drivers in the league, and he's long been a super efficient around the rim, but he was getting by anybody and everybody last year, and it was incredible to watch. And anytime you were watching, an Oklahoma City Thunder game, he just relentlessly kept scoring. It was the stamina, but also his ability to play at his own pace and just get by guys was astonishing. But he shot 90% too from the free throw line on those nearly 11 attempts per game last year. The thing though that I just said that's crazy to me is the 3-point thing. He only shot 2.5 threes per game last year, making less than 1 per game technically. And he still averaged 31.4 points per game, which is just absolutely ridiculous to
If he
me.
can add that shot to his game, like, no, I'm not talking about like Steph Curry add that shot to his game, but just like take the next step and take a few more and make a few more and just develop it a little bit, that number is going to skyrocket even
Right,
more,
and it's
which
not
is
that
scary to think about.
he's not a bad 3-point shooter. I
No,
mean,
he just needs to take more.
yeah, he shot 41% like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's not. Last year he shot a career high and he only shot 30, but this year he shot 40 or 34. So
It's because he's in Oklahoma City, but if he were a Knick or a Laker, like his reputation would be so much
oh
more
my god,
superstar than it
he got
is. And
love. Yeah.
it's starting to become that, like you said, like he's on the precipice of becoming that. But like if he had the year he had last year as a Knick or a Celtic or a Bull or a Laker or a Clipper or a Sixer, like he'd be there already. Like we'd already be talking about him as one of those elite superstars.
Right. And I think, like I said, I think in the basketball community, he got a lot of respect. I still don't think it was necessarily talked about enough what he was
Yeah.
doing last year. And like I said, it's a two-way thing. It's not that he's just doing it on one end of the floor. This is a guy that has always been an above average defender, and he works his tail off on both ends of the floor. So anyway, it starts with Shea. That's what for Oklahoma City. It starts with the fact that they don't just have a star, they have a potentially true superstar. And we know that if you want to compete for NBA finals, which I'm not saying right now that they're going to do, that's not the jump that they're going to make. But if you want to be a consistently competitive team in the NBA, you need a superstar caliber player on your team. Yeah. And he's somebody that right now, as they continue to build, looks like he could potentially be that player for them. But stepping back from Shea and looking a little bit more at the team as a whole, they play smart basketball. I mean, this was a group that, even though they're one of the youngest teams in the NBA, they're not this isn't a sloppy team or a sloppy unit. I mean, they had the 5th fewest turnovers in the league. They were top 10 in assist to turnover ratio. Josh Giddey is a big part of that. He is a bigger guard, another great rebounding guard, but an extremely special playmaker that they have next to Shea, which is that backcourt is a very scary future backcourt, and Giddey's also still only in his early 20s. But they've built a team around ball handlers, high IQ passers, and in a league with that's now all about spacing, movement, transition play. The Oklahoma City has a ton of options to go at you, and they're a team that I only think are going to improve the more that they play with each other. Jalen Williams, who I loved coming into the draft, I wanted him to fall to the Bulls really bad. Another guy who fits the archetype perfectly of what they're looking for. In terms of their ability to take a leap, they finished with 40 wins last year, which was already more than anybody was expecting. The fact that Dallas finished below them, probably isn't supposed to happen again. There's a bunch of teams in the middle as well, like Minnesota, another team that we'll talk about in a minute, in New Orleans. And, it's not necessarily going to be easy for them to greatly exceed what they did, but they, like I said, they play smart basketball. They have a superstar talent. And another big piece of the puzzle that we can't forget is that they're going to get back the number 2 pick in last year's draft, Chet Holmgren, this season. And he looked really solid when he was taking the court in Summer League for the brief time that he did. And there's a lot of potential there because they were already a pretty defensively sound team last year. But adding him to the front court, he's an incredibly elite, or he projects to be, at least at the NBA level, incredibly elite rim protector. Like, the best word you can almost use is like he's very elastic. In that front court spot, he's good.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, he's very stretchy. He's going to be guarding that 3-point line. It's kind of like, I would never compare him. He's not the same size as Wemby and things like that. But what people talk a lot about with Wemby is his ability to, almost cover the 3-point line and then dive back to the rim at the same time and defend both areas of the floor. And Holmgren's got parts of that to his game, and he's also just a very talented and accurate shot blocker. So, I hate to use this word, but because it's not as descriptive as it could be, but like, he's just unique. There's not a lot of talents that's like him in this league, Holmgren.
He's a unicorn.
Yeah, there's 100%, which is why he went number 2 overall. He's, you got to buy into that potential, that unicorn potential. And so I think adding him into the mix next to Shea, a team that already won 40 games last year, like, why can't they surpass 40 wins? Why can't they be in the, in the playoff conversation next year? All it takes is another injury from another team. All it takes is a team like Minnesota to take a step back and another team to fall off. So I really do think that OKC's got something great brewing, but we already saw last year because of the superstar potential and just the way this unit plays together that there's a lot there to like.
I'm with you. I've like I said, I've grown to be a big Shea Gilgeous-Alexander fan really over the last year because I started watching him more. I was at one of the Bulls games I went to last year was a Thunder game, and I kind of realized that's when I started to realize how good he was. Kind of kept track of him. He's fantastic, and he's a guy I root for.
All right, lastly here, the last team that I just kind of wanted to mention, this one's a little less, I would say like a little less obvious, or no, I mean, this one's a little more obvious. It's the New Orleans Pelicans, like I mentioned a second ago. This is a group that just obviously has sky high potential, but I don't want to necessarily forget about it as we enter this year. I think it's easy to kind of cast them aside because of the Zion drama, and it's just also easy to forget about New Orleans. Like that's not a team that has ever really done much, and so it's easy to forget the potential that they have. But this is a group that finished in that play-in tournament range last season, but their ceiling remains clearly so much higher than that, and it's because of what Zion Williamson is capable of. I don't think we should forget that over his career, when Zion has been on the floor, which I know hasn't been a lot, but when he has been on the floor, he's shot 60% from the field, and he's averaged nearly 26 points per game. He's been he's exceeded expectations when he's been healthy. Anytime that he's actually been out there, he's been like Shaq-like at times. And
he's had those moments. I still remember when his debut. It was at NBC Sports Chicago too, and we were watching in the newsroom. Like when he finally played, it was like, oh, this is electric. Like when he's at his best, he is electric.
Right, and that's the thing, and that's what's kind of been surprising too about Zion is watching him. He's had the moments of being. He's on the court for a little, and he's off the court, and he's on the court and he's off the court, and then last season he was on the court for those 29 games, and then that was it after that. But it doesn't matter like if he's had the injuries. When he's come back each time, he's immediately amazing. So it's like
there's never been a drop off. He's right back to it.
Right. So while he misses a ton of time, every single time he's been on the floor, it's remarkable stuff. And I actually think that so I will say similar to the Shea thing, right? We talked about Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. You need a superstar. And all due respect to Brandon Ingram, who I think Brandon Ingram's great. I think he's an all-star caliber player. I think he's another guy that's
a 1B.
Yeah, I think
there's nothing wrong with that, but he's a 1B.
Right, and I think there's still underrated aspects to him that's not talked about enough. He isn't Zion. He isn't people used to think, okay, he could be a KD light, whatever. But Ingram isn't that. At least now, maybe he continues to progress. He isn't what Zion provides you when he's on the court. Like you said, there's not that electricity that just is off the floor, or like what we saw with Shea last year when Shea was just going off there. That's what Zion brings. So as long as he's healthy, that immediately increases the ceiling of this team. And it's not like I'm saying anything new. I understand that everybody believes that, but to emphasize that even further, over those 29 games that he played last year, or I should say, until he officially was ruled out, basically didn't play again for the rest of the year because he missed a couple games in between this span. But they were 23-14 through January 2nd last year, the Pelicans. That was the third best record in the West and tied for the fifth best record in the NBA. So they were a top 3 team in the Western Conference when Zion was pretty much in the lineup. And I don't think it's crazy to think that's the area they can hang out in, again, as long as he's healthy.
He's got to play, though. It's
right.
It's an even more extreme version of Anthony Davis and the Lakers. I hope he can play. I just don't think he can.
Right. But I think that's why I think because he's spent majority of his time off the floor over his career, and because these past couple of years we've seen this thing happen where they're really good at one point and then they drop off a cliff to finish out the year. Like, I think people just think the Pelicans are bad, or some people just expect that, they're not really in the mix. But it's like, no, they are in the mix. It truly is, just as long as Zion plays, then they are in the mix. And I know it's a big if, but that's something that I think we need to keep in mind. And I also think they've done a decent job building the roster around Zion and Ingram. The fit there between those two is still needs to be figured out because they haven't spent a lot of time on the floor. Same thing with McCollum. Like those three haven't spent a ton of time on the floor, but I like, Trey Murphy in that mix. They have plenty of shooting with Murphy, McCollum, Jordan Hawkins, who they just drafted from UConn, who I love. So I like the way the roster has been constructed. There's some questions about that center position. Jonas Valanciunas maybe isn't the most organic fit there if Zion's staying healthy consistently. But the roster itself is okay. And that's just the biggest question there is. But as long as there is real health there for Zion, we shouldn't forget that this team's got like sky high potential in a lot of ways.
They have it in them.
Yeah. They have the sixth best defense already last season. They turn the ball over a little too much. Maybe they could use probably a little bit more of a traditional point guard. Maybe Dyson Daniels becomes that guy for them. I liked that draft pick for them 2 years ago. Just a young guard that was out of the G League, needs to, Ignite still needs to kind of progress. But there's a lot of room there for them to grow. They didn't add a ton this offseason, but again, that's because I think they know there's nothing we really need to add here to make this a lot better. We just need to add health. That's what we need. And as long as we do that, we can really blossom. So
it's even more out of their control though.
Yeah. And right. And it's 100% out of their control. But overall, I just wanted to mention those two teams, just like I did last week with two teams in the Eastern Conference, and the Magic and the Pacers. OKC is in a similar vein of these Magic and Pacers in a rebuilding squad. The Pelicans aren't necessarily a rebuilding team, but all four of those teams, I think, are not only on the brink of being able to take the next step, but are more than capable of it just as soon as this season if a couple things go their way. So I like both those squads a lot, and I think we need to just keep our eye on it.
I'm with you, especially OKC. Really excited to watch them next year.
Yeah, OKC is it's one of my favorite League Pass teams. That's just they're
fun to watch.
Yeah, fun to watch, and I saw them a couple times last year as well. And they're in person, and Shea was it. I also, like I said, I love Jalen Williams. It's just a fun group of guys.
Yeah.
All right, so that wraps it up. That was a good overview. Look at me praising us. I'm saying
we did a great job.
We did a great job. You loved listening to it. I know it, and you definitely are going to keep listening, and you're definitely going to subscribe. Otherwise, Matt, I hope you have a splendid weekend. We got a nice weekend time coming up here.
Yeah, me too.
Things are going to
only a few summer weekends left.
Yeah, we gotta soak it in. Things are going to be a little bit busy to wrap up these final weeks, but then basketball's here, and that's extremely exciting.
Makes our job a little easier.
It makes it a little bit easier. But thank you, basketball gods, for some news this week. We will be back next week to talk about, please, basketball. I'm praying. If you watch, you can see me praying basketball gods next week. Similar material would be great. All right. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll go pray more to the basketball gods. See you.